Hi, this is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society. We are so excited about getting ready for our spring program, which is going to highlight the UW Arboretum. And the title of our program is Its Past is Prologue, Learning from Arboretum Land. So we have special guest today, Susan Carpenter from the UW Arboretum, who actually is going to be our presenter for our program. And our program is going to be coming up soon. It's on Sunday, March 29th, 1:30 p.m. at the Fitchburg Public Library. So let's get started. Susan, welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, such a pleasure to have you with us this morning. First of all, maybe starting with what your position is at the Arboretum and then what that entails.
Okay, well, I'm the native plant garden curator and gardener. I like to add that because there's only one staff person assigned to the native plant garden, and it's a 4-acre garden right around the Arboretum Visitor Center. So it represents the native plant communities of southern Wisconsin. And as the curator and gardener, I have been involved with this project almost since the beginning, when the expansion of the visitor center was created and the garden was designated and designed by Daryl Morrison for the area right around the visitor center. So we represent those native plant communities. We have lots of different native plants. So we've been planting the garden basically from the beginning. We plant, we monitor, we manage the garden, so we do weeding and edging and all those kinds of things that are just typical gardening. We are harvesting seeds, native seeds, and sometimes we are interplanting or interseeding into areas to kind of keep the gardens, renewing areas, that kind of thing. We've had a couple of new gardens since the very beginning that weren't in the original plan, so that's been fun to put those in. And I work with so over the 23 years that I've been at the Arboretum doing this job, I've worked with side by side with about 40 UW students that I employ during the summers, and 800 volunteers. And that's individuals, so some of those people have been volunteering year on year. So it's a really great learning experience for all of them and for all of us, and we're learning from the land and from the garden as we go. So I also do a lot of outreach, both locally and statewide, about topics like native plant gardening, pollinator gardening, bumblebee monitoring and bumblebee conservation, native bees, these kinds of resilient gardening, these kinds of topics. And that takes up about, I'd say it's about half of my work duties are in that area. And so that goes all year round. And the gardening, of course, is here in Wisconsin fairly seasonal.
Great. Well, the UW Arboretum is just such a treasure amidst us. And I think many people may not know a lot of the details about the Arboretum because, there's a nice drive through there that people might do, maybe walk a trail, but not really understand maybe a lot about the Arboretum itself. So maybe you could fill us in on just the basics of, size, location, ownership, purpose, those kind of things.
Well, the Arboretum has a long history, so it's kind of exciting to be thinking about its history in terms of putting this presentation together. But right now, we are 1,200 acres here in Madison, so surrounded now, not at the beginning, but now by the city of Madison, of course, and Fitchburg. And then we have about 500 acres, a little more than 500 acres in scattered properties that are elsewhere, mostly in southern Wisconsin. It's one property up in the north, a northern pine forest. So we manage all of that land, and we have a small but mighty staff. Our staff of about 5 or 6 people, plus perhaps students who are working with those people, are doing the management on all of that land that I just described, except for the gardens, of course, which have their own care. So the landowner is the UW Board of Regents. We are part of the university, even though we're not right on campus or even touching campus physically. We are definitely part of campus and and a much loved part of campus for many, many years, and much loved by the community, as you mentioned. So we are a teaching and a research and teaching center of UW-Madison, and we are housed within the office of the Vice Chancellor for Research. So there are about 17 research centers, and some of them are more, you would think of them, when you hear the name, you'd think of them more as being focused entirely on research and not having a big public component or a big area of land where the public likes to visit, but we are unique in that sense. But that is where we are administratively. And we have our current permanent staff, just to give an idea of the size of the group out there, besides the 9 people who are working outdoors or have basically outdoor jobs, we have a total of 28 people. So the outdoor folks are the land care unit, then we have research unit, an education unit, and then an administrative or foundational unit that kind of supports many of the other groups, like business office, communications, development, other aspects like that are just supportive in general of everyone. So 28 people altogether at this time.
Quite a staff. Well, thank you for that information. I think very few people know those kind of details.
And I would add our purpose. We have a mission statement which does bring into focus those different areas that I just mentioned, to conserve and restore Arboretum Land, to advance restoration ecology, just like the research and science side, and to foster the land ethic, which is kind of a concept that Leopold wrote about a lot, and of course has had a lot of development since that time. So that encompasses really everything that we do. We are currently we're currently having a lot of new conversations with a lot of new staff and new, we've had we're in kind of a renewing period now as an organization, and so it's going to be interesting to see how these things. This has been a mission statement for about 25 years or more, and it's and now as we move forward, how's the world changed? How's the Arboretum changed? So we might see some little changes in wording on that coming up.
Well, to keep current on what's going on, and then repurpose that statements perhaps to reflect that. Well, Susan, of course, we're the Fitchburg Historical Society, and always interested in what the local connections are. Is the Arboretum in any part of it in the city of Fitchburg?
It is. Fitchburg, when you look on the map, Fitchburg looks like a very large, piece of land. It's the whole township, basically. And we have the Arboretum of the 1,200 acres. We have 200 acres that are south of the Beltline, and that's called the Grady Tract, referring to one of the farms that was there before the Arboretum acquired and then became part of the Arboretum. So the Grady Tract, about 2/3 of it, so 130 acres, something like that, is actually in Fitchburg. And so just look at the map carefully. In my talk, I will have a map that will really make this crystal clear. And so that area right now is a very exciting area. Almost all of it, except for the one kind of legacy and gorgeous prairie that is there called the Green Prairie in that same area. But most of the rest of those 130 acres is under very, very active ecological restoration right now. So as you drive up Seminole, if you can safely peek over at the Arboretum at that corner there when you cross the Cannonball Trail, you'll see the clearing that's gone on. And most of that clearing, of course, there's still trees, but the clearing of the underbrush, of the buckthorn, of the honeysuckle, of the invasive species that have been there for quite a while, and suppressing any vegetation that would have been growing there before all of those shrubs took over. We are also adding seed into these would be savannas now that we're restoring, because there's a tree canopy, but a scattered tree canopy, and a fairly open understory. And so plants that do well in that situation that would naturally be in a savanna of that type will be added with seeding. So a lot of large quantities of seed are used to do that kind of restoration as well. And then some things people would see from Fitchburg, of course, we do use prescribed fire in that area. That's a component of the restoration and also just of management of prairies and savannas. And of course, Fitchburg is no stranger to that, because just on the south side of the Cannonball Trail, Fitchburg has an area of prairie restoration that is managed by Fitchburg. So that area is contiguous, really close enough, so that we have a connection, in terms of the property lines, but also a connection in terms of the bird life and the insect life that's going back and forth, probably seeds going back and forth. So it's a good connection, and the people connection, of course, because we do have in the southeast corner of that property, of that Grady tract, there is a pedestrian entrance. So if you're on the Cannonball Trail and you head up through the Knollwood trail there, the bike trail up into the Arbor Hills, there's a trail going into the Arboretum and a pedestrian fence gate there. So you can take a walk in the prairie just from right down there near Fitchburg, or
wonderful.
in Fitchburg.
Thank you for that, Susan.
Yeah.
And I will put that on my calendar. That is so interesting. And the fact that the environments that you're creating, those native environments, are complementary, and both Fitchburg, City of Fitchburg, and the Arboretum, UW Arboretum.
Very
Wonderful
much connected.
That's great.
Connected. Mm-hmm.
So, how would you characterize UW Arboretum in its uniqueness? What makes it so special?
That's a great question. Well, lots of things make it special, but I think what makes it unique in terms of arboreta is many arboreta, most probably, are basically a collection per woody tree, trees and shrubs, a woody plant collection, planted in kind of a garden type of, traditional garden type of setting, maybe with paths or just lawn, and the specimens are, scattered about. And so those could be specimens from like all over the world. They could have a theme. Different arboreta have different emphases. And so that's kind of the traditional view, I think, of an arboretum. But this arboretum's different. We do have a renowned and very special woody plant collection that is like what I just described, about 35 acres just right near the visitor center. Our Longenecker horticultural gardens, dating back to 1935, the first tree and plants were planted. But this arboretum, from the very beginning, has had a very much larger purpose than just a tree collection. So this was originally seen and conceived to be a sample of Wisconsin native vegetation, different plant community types that would be found in Wisconsin. It was also a wildlife refuge. In fact, that was in the name originally, Wildlife Refuge. And it's also been a place where research and teaching and training students and the future leaders of the fields could be done. And because professors were really the driving and organizing force of the Arboretum at the very beginning, this was part of the role that they saw for the Arboretum as part of the university. And so some of the fields, we have a logo from the 60s that has all these different departments listed. Oh. I'm just going to list off a few for you because it's unbelievable. Botany, of course, plant ecology, zoology, plant pathology, wildlife ecology, soil science, ornithology, meteorology, horticulture, did I say that right? Geology, forestry. So professors from all those areas, through time had been involved with this enterprise. And so it was seen as this big basically learning, outdoor learning laboratory. I think that's how the professors really saw it. And also a way to train students of theirs would go on to be leaders in other places, not just here at Wisconsin.
Thank you. It is so impressive to hear that. And the different fields and disciplines that were involved in that in the university. If we move on to your program, would you like to just maybe do a few highlights without giving away too much of your program?
Spoiler alert.
People to just anticipate what they'll hear from you.
Sure. Well, I've kind of got two goals when we were planning out what the talk could cover, because we don't want to we want to put in a little bit, since spring is coming, we want to put in a little bit about native plant gardening and what people might be able to branch off from this talk into that large and fun area. So I will do that. But as I was thinking about that, most of what I know about native plant gardening that I could share with other gardeners is what I've learned from doing native plant gardening, and either at my home or at the Arboretum. So I want to touch on how often we think about history, and maybe I'm over my skis here speaking to historians about this, but we often think of history as a human story, as what people did and people's actions and how that developed into, the current pattern that we see now. But Leopold reminded us that the land is also a very important factor in how people's actions can and do continue through time. I'll just read you a little tiny excerpt. We're having Madison reads Leopold, our annual reading, and I get to read the community concept. So whether you're at the reading or not, the community concept is where I took this quote from. Many historical events, hitherto explained solely in terms of human enterprise, were actually biotic interactions between people and land. The characteristics of the land determined the facts quite as potently as the characteristics of the people who lived on it. So that's where I hope to take you. The land, what is land, and move along with some of those ideas that came out of the early days and connect them. They do connect, kind of trace them through to where we are now and where we are, and really where we're going, and where we hope to continue, our influence in both research, in education, and community activity around these ideas.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear more, Susan. Thank you for that preview. In general, what are a few of the environmental and land stewardship benefits that have come about because of the UW Arboretum?
Wow, and that is such a great question. There have been some very practical things, like the use of prescribed fire was one of the things that, of course, prescribed fire, or fire in general, has been used for millennia to manage land. We know that indigenous peoples had that, have that origin. But at the Arboretum, there was early work in the 40s and the 50s to actually start taking kind of a scientific or experimental approach to how prescribed fire would be, could be used effectively within restorations. And of course that is, commonplace now throughout. So there were some things that happened early on at the Arboretum because of kind of ahead of time, and then others have been able to learn from those, from that work. But in general, I would say that the value or the benefits is the Arboretum is really a statewide and regional, Midwestern and even beyond resource. It's like a place where people can really see, physically could come and see and study and support native plant communities and native vegetation and all that relies on native vegetation. So it's a place to learn about native plant and animal species, whatever your special area is that you like, be it birds or insects or bumblebees, and food webs and ecological connections and these kinds of relationships, and kind of build out knowledge of the world that we share. Things like the effects of climate change. Here's a place where past records and current observations and future observations can bring a lot of knowledge together. It's a place to learn how to care for and restore land, either on a bigger scale, like a few acres or bigger, or on a small scale, like a garden at your own home, or at the library right here in Fitchburg. One of my garden volunteers is involved with that project. And it's also a place that people find solace and peace, and just to be in nature, even if it's nature that's close to a city, especially I think if it's close to a city, and it's a place to get some exercise or visit with a friend or take time for your own reflection and your own quiet time. So I think those are some of the just overall benefits that the Arboretum has had, and there's probably many, many, many more.
Oh,
there are many more.
So many, and to recognize, in your articulation of all of those, how beneficial this is in its depth and breadth, what the Arboretum offers to us. So thank you for just getting into those for us, Susan. I think it helps us to appreciate more and more what we have in the Arboretum. Well, let's move on to springtime, because we're feeling it more and more as the days go on in March. And I understand that you're willing to share some spring tips to gardeners who might want to grow native plants. So garden enthusiasts being here, and I wanted to just mention that we actually have 10% off coupons that have been offered by Fitchburg Farms, and there's going to be a drawing for eligibility for a gift certificate from K&A Greenhouse. So we have lots of incentive for gardeners to come and enjoy your program. So garden enthusiasts, and maybe who else do you think would benefit from coming?
Well, I hope that people with an eye to history and people with interest, maybe they're not able, maybe they don't have a spot to garden in, but they're interested in native plants and native birds and native insects and all of the interconnected life that we have around us and that we want to foster. I would hope people like that, just even if they're not gardening, would find something of interest in this talk. And then just maybe people who visited. Often after a tour, someone will say, I never, we've been going into detail about all the little things that we see and telling stories about interrelationships and so on. And someone might say, wow, I've been here a lot, but I've never quite seen all of that yet. And every time you visit, every time you hear about the Arboretum, maybe read about it, or learn something new about it, you can see it in a different way. And so I hope that visitors and just maybe casual community members might be able to see the Arboretum with a new perspective, and on their next visit it won't look quite the same.
Seeing with more and more clarity. Susan, the last thing I'd like to ask you is what your favorite aspect of working at the UW Arboretum is, personally.
Okay. Well, personally, for me, it's just this position has just been, and the place itself has just been, a perfect mix of things that I love doing and that I have always loved doing. So, botany, working with plants, working outdoors, plant ecology. That's one of my huge interests in life. And then science education is another huge one. So this job puts both of those together in a perfect way. Teaching, mentoring, finding new questions. Every day there's new, once we think we've answered a question, now we have 5 more questions. And that's the way I like to work with my students. Like, did you get some new questions today? Because if you didn't, we need to pay attention tomorrow a little bit, a little bit more. And I also love, because I've been there a long time now, and because this area has gained over this time so much interest in native plant gardening and in pollinator conservation and in these related topics, there's a ripple effect. And the Arboretum has always had a ripple effect. And I think it has always had, it has now, and it always will have. I love to see that ripple effect moving out from the state. The garden itself that I work in is like a smaller version of the larger Arboretum, in the sense that what happens there ripples out into the state, into the community, and the people, the information travels, and the people who learn here travel, and they make it their own, and then they take it somewhere else and do the same thing. So that is so rewarding.
Oh, thank you, Susan. It's like the seeds are planted and then they are extended further and further and further. Mm-hmm. And what they grow into is, who knows, beyond,
it's really it's really amazing to see that happen.
That's what a beautiful vision. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for being with us, Susan.
Thank you.
I want to just remind people of the details of the program that Susan will be presenting for us. So again, it is on Sunday, March 29th, 1:30 p.m. at the Fitchburg Public Library. And we invite the public. Love to have you all come and enjoy the program, and then there will be door prizes and coupons also available, and refreshments. So I think a great afternoon ahead. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.